I'm looking at specifically what are the kinds of policies that can get renewable energies onto small islands. I look at it that there's three main reasons why a place like PEI should transition to renewables. The first is climate change. We have to get our carbon emissions down to zero as soon as we can, and the PEI has a very big carbon footprint per person, and so we have a responsibility to do our bit. The other is we are in PEI very dependent on fossil fuels. Like, we know the province is excited about how we produce almost 30% of our electricity from renewable sources, but electricity is actually a small part of our energy consumption in PEI. A lot of it is fossil fuels, and whether we like it or not, the global population, the world in general is going to have to deal with climate change at some point, and that means there's going to be a fee on carbon. It's going to come eventually, and the day that it happens, if anyone who is deeply invested in fossil fuels, and I just thought of your transition to propane, the fact that anyone that's still deeply reliant on fossil fuels is going to have a tough time economically. So that's another motivating factor. Like the economy of not being on fossil fuels, it's going to be to our advantage when that transition happens. But the other one is, and the one that's probably easiest to convince people on, is that economically speaking, it's got great benefits for PEI. Not only from the fact that I think we export something like over $700 million a year of money to bring in fossil fuels. That if that money stayed in PEI, imagine the economic boost they would be done. But also you're looking at, jobs of people installing equipment, maintaining equipment, and like there's a lot of work to be done, which means there's a lot of jobs to be done, which is there's a lot of economic growth to be done. And I'm focusing my attention on a small island in Denmark called Samsø. It's an O with a line through it. They're an island of about 4,300 people last time I checked. Ironically, very, very similar to PEI in terms of age distribution, political leanings, industries, like it's all farming, tourism, fisheries. They're also eroding like we are. And they actually transitioned to renewables in 10 years, like 100%.
8 years, 2 months.
They know. All right. I always rounded up to 10. I didn't know that. It was actually it was a competition that the government of Denmark put together for small islands in Denmark, and they won. But I've already done a bit of research, and I had the opportunity a couple years ago to speak to some people over there. And at the end of the day, they didn't do it because they were all granola crunching hippies that wanted to save the planet. They did it because there was policies in place that actually made it advantageous to do the transition. And there's a lot of them. There's access to funding, low interest loans, but the big one, which is the one that I'm going to put focus on with my thesis, is a feed-in tariff. And a feed-in tariff is basically just it's not a government subsidy. It's the government saying, okay, if you produce, let's say you've got a wind turbine on your lot and you're producing this much power, but you're only consuming that much, well, you can get paid for the rest of it, and here's how much you're going to get paid for it. And the tariffs tend to be different for the different sources of electricity, like solar and all that stuff. But what it does is it takes, because you were talking about saving money, well, it takes it from saving money to actually making money. So you've got in places like Germany and Denmark that have those feed-in tariffs. Like Germany, I think it's 51% of the investment in renewables is not from big energy companies. It's actually from average citizens, especially farmers. And then you've got smaller businesses and big businesses and all that stuff. But it's really coming from, if you will, not to be cheesy, but the grassroots, because it makes sense financially for them, and it makes sense for communities as well. Imagine if you had the community of Surrey get together and there's land outside the community, and they put in 2 or 3 big turbines, and all of a sudden they've actually created not just an investment, but, well, they've created an investment that brings in revenue. Farmers are also a great example for wind, because you've got these massive lots of land where you could just plop like 3 or 4 wind turbines. The amount of land you use for agriculture is tiny, but all of a sudden it becomes a source of revenue. There's a video that I saw. They were interviewing a farmer from Samsung. He actually makes as much money selling power to the grid as he is being a farmer. So to me, that's because you can convince some people on the environmental issue and this and that and the other, but if you can put a policy in place that actually makes people money, not only save them, some of them will only save and some of them will make money. That's how you get it going. And Germany and Denmark are the perfect examples. Like Germany gets about as much sunshine as Alaska.
They get less than us.
And they have much less than us. And yet, on a good summer day, they will produce 50% of their electricity from solar. So imagine what anybody in Canada could do with a similar policy, and it's incredible. And another part of it is changing the way that people think about energy production. The way that we've traditionally done it is it's concentrated energy production. So you have one massive nuclear power plant or a coal plant or whatever, and you connect that to thousands, if not millions of homes. That's how we've traditionally done it. The best way to do renewables is the complete opposite. You turn every single building into a power plant. And then that way, anything that you're not producing within your home that's going to be produced by your nuclear plant or whatnot. But it brings down the peak load, and so you don't need to produce as much with nuclear, with fossil fuels. And as time goes on, what you're seeing developments in the power grid where, and this is where it's going to eventually go, is you're taking lots of power grids where there's a lot of renewables, they're interconnected, and there's storage systems so that eventually everyone's going to just run on renewables. And that's the direction that it's going, and you're seeing that a lot in the countries that are more advanced than we are in that stage, with like Denmark, like Germany, other parts of Europe. But I really, 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 really think that it's the kind of move that's not only we should do from an environmental or ethical perspective, but also because it would be great for PEI. I think that economically speaking, for a small island like us, to not have to export or to import all that energy, and to be spending those hundreds of millions of dollars that are leaving the island would be wonderful.
Josh, the only question, the fly in the ointment possibly, my understanding is a lot of that electricity is heavily, green energy is heavily subsidized.
Yes, that's a misconception. It's the way that the feed-in tariff works is the government says, okay, this is how much, let's say you guys decide to put in a whole bunch of solar panels on your roof. The government says, this is how much you're going to get paid per kilowatt hour for your energy. The government doesn't pay for it. It just says that's what's going to be. So what the energy companies do is they turn around and they increase everybody's electricity bills to pay for whatever it is you're going to get. So I guess in a way it's a subsidy, but it's a subsidy that's paid by the entire population. So everyone's electricity bill will go up. Like the average, I think the numbers is on average like 2 to 5%. And so everyone gets together and pays for encouraging other people to produce renewable energy. And people will, like, depending on your political leanings, you'll look at that in different ways. But the way that you can argue for that raise is that, again, looking at global efforts to battle climate change, looking at the fact that fossil fuels are a limited resource that are becoming more and more difficult to get at, the cost of fossil fuels is going up, and it will continue to go up. We may have all of a sudden had a boom of natural gas, so natural gas prices are super cheap right now, but that's very, very, very short term. What we're seeing with oil prices is that we had a huge spike in 2008. I think it $143 a barrel for oil, and it crashed because of the economic crash. But as the economy improves, it's going up, 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 up. And so your heating oil is going to go up, your natural gas is going to go up, even your coal is going to go up. the great thing with the renewables is that you'll have that 2 to 5%, let's call it 5% increase. But then with time, what you're seeing in countries like Germany and Denmark is that the prices are stabilizing. Because once you've got the wind turbines installed, once you've got the solar panels installed, you don't have to pay for the wind and the sun. So it's an upfront cost, and what the feed-in tariff does is it makes it compensates for because right now in PEI, you're looking at, okay, well, I'm gonna have to spend $14,000, $13,000 for the solar panels, and the advantage to that is I won't have to pay any electricity. In Denmark, it's, okay, I'm gonna spend $14,000, and I'm gonna have access to a low interest loan from the bank, and I'm gonna actually make money off of that solar panel to pay for the loan, and then after that, it's actually a source of income. I think what you need is, you need a policy that that encourages the investments, and then whatever the best technology for the area will end up developing and coming along, and it's going to be, it's not, you know, people at the what's the expression? People let the perfect get in the way of the good. You know, people are hoping that there will be a magic bullet when it comes to getting off of fossil fuels, and there isn't one magic bullet. It's going to be changing the way we think about energy, and just, you know, doing it at a gradual pace. But for me, the way I look at it, the most important thing is to have the policies that actually encourage it. Like, just the fact that we don't pay any taxes on our heating oil is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
It's a great policy thing going to get reelected on.
Exactly, and that's the problem, which is where education comes in. Because you've got countries like Sweden where they pay $120 per ton of CO2 emissions. They're taxing CO2 emissions. We're actively in PEI subsidizing it. We're subsidizing people. We're subsidizing Irving as though they needed the money by saying you're not going to pay a tax on your heating oil. And although I understand you can make the argument that there's poor people that can't afford it, and I completely agree with that. Having said that, most islanders can afford it, especially at a time when we don't have any money, and as a teacher, I know that we need more money in the province. The fact that we don't tax heating oil is not only irresponsible from a fiscal point of view, but also from an environmental point of view. You know, there's other ways of helping out poor folks that need help with their heating oil. But, you know, I'm sure that, my wife and I make enough money to pay for heating oil, but at the same time, you need a higher price on fossil fuels to get people off of it, which is exactly what the rest of the world is trying to do. And in Canada, we're completely going in the wrong direction. It's a big question in the renewable energy domain, is what's going to happen to those, I keep forgetting the word, energy companies, there's a word for that. Utilities, thank you. But the one thing that we're always going to need is a grid. So it's going to become where they're going to become less important for producing energy, but they're going to become much more important when it comes to having an efficient grid, because the grid's going to have to get more complicated when it comes to renewables. If you've got, like even in PEI, if you've got 50,000 homes or buildings that are producing energy and that are distributing it to other buildings, and you're interconnected with Nova Scotia and this and that, it's going to become more complicated, and it's going to be more technological, and they're going to have a much bigger role in that part of it. So I think what's going to happen is they're going to have to adapt. Of course, they're going to try not to, especially the ones that are highly dependent on producing, you know, whether from fossil fuels or nuclear.
But PEI doesn't really produce any energy.
No, exactly.
It's like totally
They
distribution.
have to pay for that cable, right?
Yeah.
We produce about 20 to 30% from wind. The rest of it's coming from through maritime electric, but it's from different sources.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's coal, sometimes it's natural gas, sometimes it's nuclear, and it's interesting because there's a fellow, I have I guess you could call her a friend, who in my program who did, her thesis was about looking at the relationship between government and the utilities and whatnot. And
I love
from
your thesis.
yeah, I have it digitally. She from what she's done with interviews with people at, for example, Maritime Electric, they're pretty much open to anything. What they've been saying is, government makes the rules, and we'll go with what they say. Like if government makes a rule that we're pushing more renewables, and like, of course they say that to the study, but if they have any weight to push around at government, they'll do whatever's in their best interest. But I think at the end of the day, like you were saying, if we can get enough people in PEI to be asking for it, the government will hopefully play along. And eventually, eventually even the old companies will play along. From my perspective, knowing what I know about things like climate changes, will they play along soon enough?